Okay, and we are live.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our September 9th, 2020 Somers Planning Board meeting. Can we please stay in our seats and wherever we are, but let's do the pledge together.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the
United States of America
and
to
to
the
the
republic
for
for which it stands, one nation,
God, indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and justice for all. It's hard to believe that this 9/11 is coming up this Friday.
Yeah.
Oh,
How many
Oh, my
years?
Lord. 20, is it 20 years? Am I right?
19.
Huh?
19.
19.
19, isn't it?
19.
Wow.
19.
Unbelievable.
Okay, Surratt, could you please take the roll call?
Yes, Chairman Curry,
Here.
Vicky Gannon,
Here.
Nancy Garbino,
Here.
Jean Goldenberg, Dennis McNamara,
Here.
Bruce Prince,
Here.
Christopher Zaberto.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And in case I forget to thank you in the future, and hopefully I did in the past, thank you, Vicky, once again for picking up the phone and handling our public hearings. First on our agenda is the draft minutes from July 8th, 2020. Any
John,
additions?
it's July 12th. It's minutes from July 12th.
July
All
12th.
right. All right, I have July 8th. I'm sorry, I apologize. Then the draft minutes
Maybe I'm wrong.
from July 12th, 2020. Any,
Sorry,
July 8th, it
it
would have
is
been.
July 8th. I'm sorry,
but-
I'm wrong.
Okay. So my motion still stands. Is there anybody that has any additions, corrections? Otherwise, I'm looking for a second.
I'll
Second.
second that for you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, first on our agenda is the public hearing for the Bluestone Peak Academy. And as per the applicant, they've requested to be adjourned to our October 14th meeting. The next two items on our agenda is two T-Mobiles. And they've asked, and I'm going to, just for the record, I'll do them both separately. The one is for the 325 Route 100, which is in the Somerstown Shopping Center. And they've asked to be adjourned also to our to our October 14th meeting. And the second one is for the T-Mobile application known as 80 Route 6, which is in the Somerstown Shopping Center. And they have also asked to be adjourned until our October 14th meeting. So that brings up next on our agenda is the project review for the limited partnership with Verizon Wireless application and modifications to their special permit and site plan for the property known as 2580 Route 35, also commonly known as the Santaroni property. We're in receipt of letters from Wood and Curran, and also I believe Surratt left us a memo on that too. So is there somebody here, an applicant's representative?
Yes. Good
Yes.
evening, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Good evening. Yes, could you just
My name is
listen to hear
Michael.
from you first, please?
Sure. My name is Michael Sheridan. I'm an attorney with Snyder and Snyder, and we represent New York SMSA Limited Partnership DBA Verizon Wireless in connection with its upgrade or proposed replacement of equipment at 2580 Route 35 in Somers, New York. As indicated with the filing, the application is an eligible facilities request under federal law, which we've provided the documentation to show that. And as such, upon this board's review, the federal law requires that it shall be approved for the equipment replacement and location of equipment at the property.
Thank you. Joe or Surratt, would you like to weigh in?
Surratt, why don't you go first?
Okay, there are a couple of things that the board needs to make determinations on this. As Michael said, they're making different kinds of modifications. This is not a renewal application. And what they've applied for is for the modifications. And the first thing that the board has to determine is whether these modifications related to site plan are minor. And if the board considers them to be minor, the applicant has asked for a waiver of site plan approval, which is permitted under section 170-114 F1B as in boy, which says that you can waiver it if there's no increase in floor area or no addition to site disturbance. There was a letter, Michael submitted several new pieces of information today. And on one of those from Tectonic, they verified that there was no new site disturbance. So if the board agrees with that, it should determine whether or not it wants to waive full site plan approval. So that's item number one that the board has to consider. The second is, I had raised the issue again in my memo because this has become an issue by different residents as well as by the board itself related to coverage and its adequacy. But as we mentioned prior to this meeting, it's been determined that the issue of coverage should only be considered by the board when it is a renewal, and that's not what this application is for. So we'll have to wait for the issue of renewal of this application. The other question that I raised that the board again is always concerned about, and Joe may want to weigh in on this, was the determination of adequacy of the structural integrity. And again, there was a new submission today by Tectonic talking about the mounting, and that Tectonic memorandum indicated that it was sufficient. And I'll let Joe see if he agrees with that. And then the other thing that the board has to determine, which was requested by the applicant, is whether or not it is willing to waive the public hearing for the special permit and site plan, for which provisions are made in section 170-19.6C and 170-129.9A. So I'll turn it over to Joe, and then we can come back and you can consider the two things that you need to do, site plan approval and waiving of the public hearings.
All right, so I have a couple questions for Mike. You know, I did want to follow up. I had the coverage flag too. I recognize that this is not a renewal, so but I guess I am curious. You are swapping out equipment. Will that have any effect on coverage? Is a question that I did want to ask you.
I mean, I think the equipment is intended to improve coverage. It's always they're always looking to improve their facilities and improve the service that they provide. So that is the goal of it. But as you know, as stated in our letter, that's as it's an eligible facilities request, that is something that is not required in connection with such an application.
Okay, so I think what I heard you say was you suspect, or it's your understanding that the equipment would be the same or better coverage, but you can't provide any assurances to that regard?
I don't have any documentation that was filed with the application or any on me. Certainly the idea is to provide better coverage when possible. But again, as this is an eligible facilities request, that is not something that was required in connection with this application.
Right. Well, I'll let Joe handle the whole eligible facility stuff. But to me, I think that, you know, obviously we're looking to make sure that we're providing coverage to the, you know, to the community. And I just want to make sure, you know, I think it might be it's probably a good question for you to ask your consultants on whether there is just to verify that we're not degrading coverage. I think that's the most important thing, is that the coverage isn't getting worse because of this equipment change. So I'll move beyond that, but I thought for the record, that might be a good conversation to have. The other piece on the structural integrity, I mean, just to confirm, Mike, you're just swapping out equipment on the tower, because the certification that was provided was not for the tower itself. It was for the mounting equipment and the mounting brackets to hold the equipment, essentially. And it had the language in it that I'm comfortable with. But I just want to confirm that we're just talking about just the mounting, we're just mounting new antennas on the existing pole. And the analysis that you submitted was just to demonstrate that that mounting equipment.
Sorry, I lost you there. I lost
We
you at the
lost-
end there.
You're gone, Joe.
You must be on cellular.
Yeah.
He's down near Route 35.
Where's Joe?
He disappeared.
I think what he was saying is he wanted to make sure that the equipment that you're putting in is just going to be mounted on the tower, that it's not, and no structural changes. I'm not putting words in his mouth, but I think that's what it sounded like to me he was asking.
I'm not, I mean, certainly the plans show what is going on the tower. It's some equipment, replacing antennas, replacing RHs, and I think, and as indicated even in the tectonic letter, they sort of ran through it today, that was submitted this afternoon, just sort of summarized it, replacing 6 antennas, replacing 6 existing remote radio heads or RRHs, replacing 1 existing hybrid distribution box, and installing 3 RHs and 2 new hybrid distribution boxes. So that's all going to be within the existing area where Verizon's equipment is currently located on the tower.
Counselor, I have a question regards to these improvements. Will it change the footprint that currently exists under the currently filed site plan that we have with the town? And will there be a change in height variance? And so I do believe your pole has a variance for its height. Are we increasing or taking away on the size of that pole based on the improvements that you anticipate here?
No. In fact, Verizon is the second carrier on the tower. There's one above Verizon, and Verizon is only replacing equipment and installing equipment on its existing antenna mounts that are already attached to the tower. Those mounts are not changing. Therefore, essentially the footprint is not really changing at all.
And you provided a structural integrity report. I think I heard our engineer say that. Was that in reference to the pole with the equipment on it, or was it just the equipment and its mountings alone?
That was referencing to the mountings, and they also did I believe a visual inspection. There was a letter that was submitted previously of the pole to make sure that visually there wasn't any issues with it.
And that passed muster then. We saw no issues with the structural integrity based on the visual inspection.
I'm not an engineer, but they signed and sealed these plans based on their knowledge of this tower, which we submitted for this upgrade.
Fantastic. Thank you, Counselor.
Sure, thank you.
John, I'm
That's
sorry.
okay.
I lost power, so I'm sitting in the dark. Oh, power's back. Power just came back.
Oh, there you go.
Let's get NICEAG on the call.
So I'm sorry, Mike, just confirming that, I was just asking, I'm just confirming that you're just really just replacing, and the structural report addressed the mounting bracket that it's attached to.
Yes, I believe that is the case, and yes, they're only replacing the antennas and equipment in the area where Verizon's equipment is existing on the tower. They're replacing and adding the equipment at that location on the tower.
Yeah, I mean, John, with that clarification, in that confirmation, I should say, the structural report that was submitted includes the type of language that I'm looking for. It's a definitive certification that it is meets structural requirements. So I'm comfortable, satisfactory structural requirements. I'm okay with that.
Okay, so
I don't know if anybody else is having a problem, but I'm having a problem hearing you, Joe.
no,
Still?
I
No.
can hear, but
We hear.
I
it.
heard him all right.
yeah.
Okay.
And then
So,
Joe,
okay, Joe, you feel comfortable with us waiving the site plan
Yes,
and public hearing?
yes.
Okay,
Joe,
I'd like to hear from the rest of the board before I make a motion, or anybody else who wants to say anything.
I just want to ask Joe one question.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Joe, with regard to that document that says it's sufficient,
Yeah.
Am I assuming that, God forbid, this tower falls down, that the town is not going to be liable by accepting that report that says a visual thing is sufficient? And
Well,
go
yeah,
ahead.
I'm sorry, Bruce. I was just gonna say, remember, what we're talking about now is not the tower. It's the equipment that is putting on the tower, and the certification is relative to the mounting bracket on the tower itself, right?
Okay.
So we're not talking about the overall tower because we're not at a renewal phase.
Okay.
We're
But
not at a renewal phase.
But the same thing occurs that if for some reason these brackets fell down, I'm
Yes.
looking about that, then we are in the clear with regard to
Yes.
liability.
I believe so. I mean, we can ask Joe, we can go through the actual language on that, but they reference an ANSI standard, which is the direction that we're moving with in some of the other applications that we're working. They're referencing the ANSI, inspection reports that they completed, and that based on that analysis, it's deemed to be sufficient, and there's a certification on that. So I see that as enough to answer the question. Yes, if that mounting bracket failed and that piece of equipment came flying off and, God forbid, hurt somebody or damaged something, I believe that this certification would protect the town.
I think that that's true, by the way. I think that's the purpose of that certification in the record. And I would even suggest, and I'm sure that it's occurred to Joe, this is kind of what we've been knocking around about. The sort of language that's in here is what we've been knocking around about on those other applications, for what it's worth. But yes, the answer to your question is I think it protects it.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Any other board member comments?
I just want Joe to note it when he was out with the power that we established that there's no change in the site plan footprint, Joe, and there's no height increase or decrease of the pole as a result of the equipment.
Yes.
And
Good.
so that sort of leans towards favoring a waiver at that point, in
Yep.
my opinion. But I
Yes.
just wanted you to know that too.
Thank you. And I would concur with your assessment on that.
I have a question. Our town attorney is now present. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Goody. I don't remember on which tower application a lawyer letter came in today or yesterday telling us that our questions having to do with backup batteries, that we don't have a say because that comes under the FCC regulations. My question is, he didn't cite the law other than generally. I mean, I basically understand we're kind of ruled by the FCC regulations, but I always thought you can't challenge it, but you could make it greater. I know in some New York laws, we can do that. And in terms of protecting water, we can require as a town greater protection than the state demands. But when it comes to the FCC, town attorney, could we request greater backup than is required by the FCC?
I don't think so. I understand the question and certainly understand the frustration. It's something that comes up regularly, as we all know. But I think the simple answer is no. We don't have that authority.
I just wanted to hear it from you.
Yep, I understand.
Okay.
Hey, Mike, I have one other question before the board makes its action, as I'm thinking this through. So the structural analysis, towards Bruce's question, as we've talked about and established here, is a function of the mounting brackets, and it was determined to be sufficient. I guess my question is, it doesn't address the tower at all, right? So
No.
if, I could see scenarios where this equipment, for example, if it was different, might increase the wind cross-section and therefore put more stress on the tower than was originally contemplated in the tower analysis. Do you have any insights into that aspect at all? Like, for example, is the equipment smaller? Is it generally have less cross-section, so therefore it's more, do you have any comments relative to the impact that this new antenna will have on the existing tower?
No.
I mean, my understanding is that the equipment is relatively the same size. It's going on the tower in relatively the same locations as the existing equipment. And my understanding is that the engineers who put this together have, reviewed their mounting structural. I think they went to the tower and they did a visual inspection. They prepared and signed and sealed the plans for submission.
So what I would just ask the board is, as the board proceeds to move, decides, and if the board does decide to move forward, I do think that we should make it a contingent approval if that's the direction that the board goes, just to get clarification, Mike, that adding this equipment will not increase any loads on the tower. And if it does increase loads, I do think that we should get some information on the tower itself.
That's a good idea. Yes, I agree with you.
Wind.
I have one more comment regarding, this may be superfluous. It isn't to me, but Michael, do you have any knowledge of why they're doing this? I mean, is the equipment failing? Is it an upgrade to improve it, or have they given you any information of why they're doing this work?
My understanding is, as the technology is always changing and always improving, and they're always looking to improve their facilities and sites. And when they get the opportunity to do it, they like to go in and replace the equipment with the latest technology that they can use at those sites. And I believe that's what this site is. It's a way to get the latest technology that they can use at the site. And they've been doing this. Verizon's been doing this all over the county and has done it at different sites and many upgrades to their existing facilities to provide better services to the communities.
I assumed that was going to be your answer, but that's fine.
Well, then, I think Joe Barbagallo made a great point. I think we can still consider waiving the site plan and also the public hearing with the condition that the applicant gets back to us answering Joe's questions about with these new changes, not going to change anything with the structural technology, the structural engineering of the tower. Does that sound right, Joe?
Not have any negative impact.
Negative impact.
Yeah, will not negatively impact the structural, integrity of the existing monopole.
Could I make a request? Can I make a request, since if that's what is being sought, is there any way we could get this approval from the planning board? And that is certainly something at the building permit stage that the building inspector and Mr. Barbagallo could review whatever information.
Right. That's what we're talking about.
That's the way I'm making my proposal.
Yeah.
It's contingent upon Woodard and Curran and our town employees agreeing with that. Yes.
So it'll be
a condition
prior to issuance of building permit, Mike.
Right.
Great.
But we can still waive site plan tonight, and we can still waive public hearing.
Yes.
Contingent upon that being satisfactory.
And you could also, the board could also approve the project for your signature too, right? And we can work through that too, right? So we can go all the way tonight and just have that one action item to follow up on.
Right.
At the building permit stage, correct?
Prior to issuing the building permit, yes.
Also, if I could just say, on the submitted plans, there's a note: antennas and equipment subject to change based on availability at time of construction. So I think review at the building permit stage would seem to be prudent.
Right.
Yes.
If that was a motion, I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Next on our agenda is an application for site plan approval for the construction of a CVS Pharmacy with a drive-through at 77 and 81 US Route 6, and that's by the TM Crowley and Associates. I'm assuming that one of their representatives from the applicant is here tonight. Can you give us a brief presentation, please?
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman. This is Lucia Chiocchio with Cuddy and Fader, and we represent the applicant. I'm joined by Patrick O'Leary from BHB. He is the professional engineer and site civil engineer for the project. I think at this point, Patrick, I'd like to turn it over to you and you can walk them through the plan. And then we can take some initial feedback and some comments on it. And what we'd like tonight is referral to the Zoning Board of Appeals for the drive-through, which requires an area variance. And once that process, the Zoning Board of Appeals process is completed, we'll be back before the Planning Board for site plan approval. And at that time, we would be submitting additional materials and studies and traffic analyses and so forth, based on consultation, obviously, with Saret and Joe and the town's consultants. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Patrick, and then we're happy to answer any questions.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, planning board members and staff. My name is Patrick O'Leary. I'm a PE in the state of New York, as well as many states throughout the Northeast. And tonight I'll be first I'm going to try to share my screen with you so that you can see the plan. Can you see?
Yes.
Yes.
You can see the colored graphic?
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, sir.
All right, so under the proposal here is on Route 6 at the recently reconstructed intersection. We're looking at proposing a CVS Pharmacy at that location on about 2.4 acres of land. To the best of my knowledge, from a dimensional aspect with respect to area, side yard setbacks, landscape requirements, pervious, impervious coverage, the site itself is zoning compliant. And I would suggest the exception to that would be the inclusion of a prescription pickup, drop off, or drive-through located on the back side of the store over here. Unfortunately, I guess when you show this on the screen, I got the cursor. I don't know if that shows up when you're looking at it.
It does.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
It's very clear.
The drive-through is right here in this location. The site itself is going to be a very complicated site. There is a drainage feature that runs through the site here. You can see the wetland formation over in this area. It is going to require culverting that drainage feature and then building the parking lot over it. It will have extensive wetland permitting associated, including core application, water quality certifications, DEC, and of course, the local Conservation Commission and wetlands. In addition to that, it has been identified from a zoning perspective, your zoning code does not I apologize for that. The zoning code does not specifically address the drive-through associated with a pharmacy, and it has been identified that we need to go to the ZBA to get an area variance for that drive-through facility. Once we complete, assuming we can complete the application with the ZBA and it's acted on favorably, we can move forward with the Army Corps of Engineers and DEC. We'll be back before the planning board for a very intensive review on an application that will have three predecessor approvals. We anticipate during the next process of the planning board, we fully expect we're going to have to readdress wetlands and environmental issues with the planning board, as well as all traffic considerations. You have a new intersection there. It's going to require some upgrades in the signalization. Will require an intensive traffic study of not only this intersection, but adjacent intersections, and a review of pedestrian traffic, as well as internal site circulation. For this application, just to provide context for the board prior to it hopefully moving forward to the ZBA, we did provide a traffic memo generally summarizing trip generation associated with a CVS. And typically a CVS of this size, 15,000 square feet, will generate about 130 trips during the peak hour. It's a breakdown of that is around 66 in, 64 out during the peak hour. Obviously, there's some fluctuations of that traffic. Probably 20 to 30% of it, if not more, is passed by traffic. CVS itself is not a destination location, for example, like Home Depot, Lowe's, or supermarkets, but rather it's much more of a neighborhood facility and intended to provide service to people within a 2, 3, 4 mile radius of the site. We did go out and count drive-through locations, both in the immediate area, Mohegan Lake and Carmel, as well as 2 sites in Connecticut that had been counted pre-COVID times, with the intent being to provide any comparisons to changes in drive-through facility, that may be applicable to this one with our current environment within the, we'll call it the COVID era. The counts that we did see in the other facilities are very consistent with counts we've had associated with CVS's. We've been doing the program for CVS since 1997. The highest drive-through count we had recorded to date was 22 vehicles in an hour. That was in Worcester. Mohegan Lake, interestingly, had one of the higher counts I can remember seeing in the past 20 years or so, at 17 vehicles in 1 hour. But once again, that's about 1 vehicle every 3.5 minutes. They're not fast food drive-throughs. It's not intended to have 100 vehicles going through there. The prescription pickup drop-off points are heavily utilized, particularly by families with sick children, for example, coming back from doctors, and also seniors in the community. CVS itself would prefer not to have people use the drive-through because they're not walking through the store picking up potential wares. The overall development provides 76 parking spots. 74 are required for the site. The parking layout is fairly open and spacious for movement of vehicles. Trucks enter through the signalized intersection, traverse in a counterclockwise manner around the site through the drive-through area. The loading is on the back side, and then they would exit back out onto Route 6. We have had discussions with staff and your consultants who have provided some very good suggestions to date on the potential site plan. One of which, and we included a graphic in your package demonstrating the proposed suggestions. One of the suggestions is, as opposed to having the loading area here, creating a knockout in this area so that the truck could get out of the drive aisle itself, which we think is a good idea. We're very happy to accommodate it. Another suggestion was to reconfigure the dumpster compactor area over here and take the compactor, the small dumpster compactor unit here, place it over in this area behind the building. It will reduce the impact of the area on the drive aisle itself and hopefully minimize any impacts to the aesthetics. We will need to look at your comprehensive sidewalk plan. We are providing sidewalks through here. There's some of the sidewalk is shown along Route 6 here. I don't know what happened to some of the coloring of the sidewalk itself, but we know the sidewalks for the proposed CVS will need to be integrated with your overall sidewalk plan for the community, which will likely incorporate some form of modifications to the pedestrian heads and pedestrian signalization of the signalized intersection there. We do believe this will have minimal impact from a traffic perspective in the area, while providing benefit to the community, particularly seniors in this day and age, as well as families with smaller children trying to stay out of stores in such areas. As noted, we respectfully request to be forwarded on to the ZBA so we can attempt to receive permission to construct the drive-through. And then certainly we'll be back for what we anticipate will be an extensive review, be it by the board members, staff, and your consultants. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to turn it back over to you for any questions. I'm trying to keep it short because I know we're going to be spending, I hope to be spending a great deal of time in the future with you once we come back from the ZBA and the Army Corps, initial meetings with the Army Corps.
Thank you very much. Nice presentation. Mike, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Mike Galante, Hardesty in Hanover. I've actually been having discussions with Patrick for probably over the summer as far as the approach to looking at the drive-through, sampling at other facilities existing prior to the pandemic, of course, and a comparison during the recent times, which have changed a lot of the patterns. Saret and I have chatted about this probably over the summer, and I've become probably more aware of CVS drive-throughs myself, just to kind of watch things and better understand them. I've actually been using one more recently for pharmacy pickups and so on. I've reviewed the information provided in the package from Patrick. I generally agree with the findings. I agree with the sampling. And as far as the queuing, the number of vehicles per hour is essentially what I've seen, to be honest. And I've watched it during certain peak periods around over the last month or so, realizing it was summer months, but realizing that, in some cases, people are not going into the store to pick up medications. They're going through the drive-through, which is what I was doing exactly. So generally speaking, I haven't finalized any review, but as far as what's been provided to the town, as far as potential impacts due to a drive-through window for a CVS, I would agree with the findings that they really have minimal impact on the roads. And of course, there will be a separate and full traffic study if this was to move forward back to the planning board at some time in the future. And at that point, Patrick and I will talk about scope, and we will eventually review the document. Of course, this goes not only to the town, but the New York State Department of Transportation for their review and approval to construct 2 driveways and modify a traffic signal. So I would agree there's a fair amount of work to do, but this is the first step. And beyond this first step, if it was to go beyond ZBA, there'd be a much more detailed work from the applicant and their traffic consultant.
Thank you, Mike. I assume you're going to the ZBA meeting.
Me?
Yes.
Assuming I'm invited, I'll be happy to be there.
Assuming you're invited, yes. I think it would behoove them to have you come. I don't know what the rest of the board thinks. I'm assuming it's a little early to be clearing ourselves lead agency until we hear back from ZBA. Does that make sense?
Well, we could declare ourselves lead agency now. And
I can't hear you, Lucia.
No, that was Nancy, I
That was
think.
Nancy.
No, I just threw it out there as
We
something.
are the lead agency, period.
Except they have not, the EAF that they have needs some significant revisions and additions.
Oh, okay.
So it may be better to wait until after they come back with their revised package.
Okay, I have a comment I'd like to make, and that is a question, I'm sorry. Will you be having a minute clinic here? will it be the 2 rooms or 3 rooms that we require for that?
To the best of my knowledge, that will be incorporated here, yes.
Oh, good. That's very good news. I think you have a lot of housing near there that will find that very helpful. Not everybody has insurance, and a lot of people are losing their insurance. A lot of people are out of work or have jobs in this area that does not provide insurance. And those minute clinics are really wonderful, especially in that area, and a great aid. And I also would like to comment on the drive-through. I have vivid memories of being a young mother and needing those prescriptions. And gee, I wished I had a drive-through back then, those days. And I look forward to us forwarding a recommendation to the zoning board in support of the drive-through. So I'll just start the ball rolling there.
I agree.
Can someone explain to me why they need to even go to the zoning board? What exactly is the variance they're looking for with this? Is there a specific code about a drive-through, or is it has to do with the size? I'm just curious now about that.
Lucia, you want me to take it?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
well, go ahead.
Okay. Although the town currently has 1 or 2 drive-throughs related most specifically to banks, drive-throughs are not permitted by the zoning. And when I say not permitted, anything that is not specifically identified as a permitted use in the zoning is not allowed. And drive-throughs are not mentioned as permitted uses anywhere in the zoning.
I got you.
And this
So
was-
because we lack the language, any drive-through, whether it's for ice cream or in this case medications, needs to get a zoning variance because of that,
Correct.
the lack of language
Correct.
in the town code.
That's
that
right.
is correct.
So they
Thank
need an
you.
area variance. Would you like the
Got it.
history? I can give you the history.
Nance, we could take that offline, but
Okay.
I would like that history. I'm just curious as to how some things evolve to where we are today for my own thought process.
I'll give it to you privately.
Thank you.
I'd like to make one comment, which I see that you guys changed the what I would call a very circuitous exit from the drive-through. The idea of having somebody go between an unloading dock and a dumpster and making S turns to get out, what seems to be seem to have started off as a very bad location for both of those items. And I'm glad that you guys corrected those things so that you have a basic clear drive exit from the unit. So I commend you on your changes.
Hi,
Yeah.
can I ask a question via text message, please? We have a question. The person is not identifying themselves by name, but the question is, what was the address of the supposed CVS? That's exactly what the question says. What was the address of the supposed CVS? Do you have a street address, a number for Route 6 where it is?
Yeah, 77
76?
and 81 US Route 6.
Say it again. That wasn't clear.
There are 3 lots that are involved in this, and I should mention that as part of the application, separately, the applicant is going to merge those 3 lots. 2 of them have frontage on Route 6, and therefore the address of the 2 lots that have frontage on Route 6 are 77 and 81 Route 6.
And so those are the numbers. So just to make sure that the person asking the question understands, so to describe it, the signalized intersection where it's joining on the lower part of the page, the right-hand side, that signalized intersection leads to Clayton Boulevard, right?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
So it's the entrance at the Baldwin Place where the Stop and Shop is. It's on the Music Baldwin Place side.
Yeah,
Right.
the western side.
Western side. Okay, can I ask a question about I know we're not doing site plan right now, but just about the arrangement on the plan? Removing the dumpster and moving the loading zone over, I think makes a lot of sense. You end up with a lot of empty space. You come through the drive-through and it's pretty spacious on that side. So I'm just wondering why, given that you've sort of moved those two things out of the way, why you're not moving the building a little to the left, so to speak, and that would give you a little more room for your parking spaces on the right where you've got the entrance and exit at the signalized intersection. And also, because looking at those spaces where you have the rows of the handicap parking spaces and then you've got a regular parking space, they're sort of at a 90-degree angle to each other. That first space there on the bottom would seem to be kind of tricky. Don't know if you'd really want to use that as a space. So I just wanted to throw out those two things. Having made all that space, why don't you move it over a little bit and it gives you more room on the other side?
We will certainly revisit it, as you know, within your packet, we provided some of the comments and suggestions graphically that were provided by the staff and your consultant, and we're going to take any suggestions and comments that come back from the board this evening and incorporate them once again into that plan. Because what we will have to do is we have to go through a process and go back to CVS and obtain their authorization to make these changes. Regarding the back of the store, the biggest thing back there is a WB 65 tractor trailer is typically utilized whenever possible to service a CVS. What that does is it helps to eliminate the number of trucks coming in and out of the site over the course of the week and can actually reduce the deliveries down to possibly 1 delivery or 2 deliveries per week. You need that room on the back side of the store over there, given the location of the drive-through, configuration of the drive-through for the WB 62 to make 65 to make it around that area, not infringe upon the building or anything else. You need that open area back there. But I concur with you on that parking spot up by the ADA space is the one that's immediately to the south of it and connected to the most southerly space. I would suggest that when we move to final design, once again, after incorporating any of the changes, that particular space, may be best left turned into landscape, since we do have 2 extra spaces on the site right now. So I think that's a very good suggestion, and we will reflect that. And we appreciate any other comments or suggestions we get from you at this time, because it will only help to make our application that much more complete when we come back, hopefully post ZBA and post initial comment, be it from the Army Corps as well as DEC. So thank you for the comments, much appreciated.
Hey, Patrick.
By the same logic, you could do the same at the pace at the on the right hand. There's a row of spaces at the right where it kind of joins with the spaces going across. You've got the same logic where you have 2 cars kind of going like that. Yeah, your hand was just there. Up and go to the right of the site. Top space on the right.
Oh, right here.
There, you got the same kind of logic right there.
We will revisit.
Not as tight, but yeah.
Yeah, that one's a little more spacious because you have probably about a 6-foot tangent before that parking spot. But we'll revisit it with the actual car turning movements. And should we leave it there, we'll demonstrate with the car turning movements backing out its adequacy to you. But we'll pay attention to both those parking spots. Thank you.
Will there be any traffic, what do they call it? The traffic slowing?
Calming.
Traffic calming devices integrated into the site?
It's actually a fairly circuitous path throughout that site right now. Between the landscape islands, you have the 4 landscape islands right there and the 3 drive aisles. I think it's fairly circuitous for cars to be moving in and about, as opposed to, I understand your concern, larger big boxes, be it the Home Depot, Lowe's, supermarket, you can get fairly large expanses of paving where, people can get to some fairly high speeds. As you look through here, I mean, generally speaking, in that parking lot, you're looking at about 100 feet, would probably be the straightest, course that a car could be on before having to make a turn one way or the other. So I don't know if traffic calming is really,
Okay,
they're very limited right now. I don't know how much more we'd limit them.
okay, that's right. And I'm sorry for all the questions. I'm just, and the other, there's an island that has cement, looks like it's kind of beige with little speckles on it.
Correct.
So where you have the end of the island where you've got a curve on it, there's the two parking sort of islands, that the one that's closer to the building where it's sort of cut off at an angle. What's the purpose of that? What's going on there?
That goes back to the tractor trailer. To be
Okay,
able to get a tractor trailer into the site, I've done, I don't know, probably about 18 million square feet of retail. And I just assume put islands in and use the concrete where necessary, as opposed to have trucks run over trees and leave landscape islands that look horrible in the future. That's the intent there. The tractor trailer comes in and takes a left, and the rear tracking wheels on the trailer actually go over the island. To do something to avoid doing that, you have to extend the site so far back into the wood line. Environmentally, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, to take down, a massive number of trees just to keep that little green area. So it makes sense to put mountable curb there, let the tracking wheels of the tractor trailer go over it, and let's save the trees on the backside over there in the natural state.
makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Thank you for the explanation.
Oh, my pleasure.
Patrick, I just had, just want to clarify a few things, right? So I appreciate, I was looking at this and I saw the same thing Bruce did. And I know we talked about it. So I'm glad that the supplements showed, and you're talking here this evening about moving those, the loading dock and the dumpster area. One of the things that I want to make sure you reference, I know when we spoke, it wasn't set on whether you were going to put that further in the back or whether we were going to extend out the side of that building to, on the west there to handle it. I just want to make sure that if we're going to, first of all, it sounds like there's a full commitment to accommodate and move those around as necessary. But I want to make sure that if we move the dumpster area to that back area as you propose, that doesn't give you a setback issue that would require to go back to zoning. So I would just suggest that if you think that's a possibility, that's where we're going to put it, is in the back there, you might want to consider whether that requires an additional zoning variance or not.
Okay, I have the rear setback lines out here. And, the 60-foot rear yard setback is quite a bit off of there.
Okay.
And just for clarity to everybody, this compactor right here, the smaller dumpster here, is the one that's going to be displaced over here. And what that will do is it'll bring this fence line in much closer here. You would not want to move this dumpster, this compactor here, over remotely from the building, because it is internally loaded from the building.
Okay.
I mean, that keeps the trash from going outside, yeah.
So, obviously I want to make sure that, I'm sure Mike is going to want to know how are we unloading that, how the trucks pick stuff up, because it seems like they might have to go counter to the flow direction. Right.
Now, typically the way we would put this in here, in this area here.
I'm talking about the bigger one.
Oh, the bigger one, same thing. The truck would come through here.
Yeah, he would have to back in, wouldn't he?
But yes,
typically
they back in and pick those up. Yep.
Going opposite the flow direction,
yes.
Which is not really ideal, right? So I still want to make sure that we can take a hard look at making sure that we've got that right. I mean, just so the board knows, I was a little concerned about the aesthetics on what this would look like. Pat was referencing that, the aesthetics, that they understood that. I thought by squaring this off in some way, we could make it more aesthetically pleasing. And, we might eat up that space you were talking about, Vicky, with a wall, but at least aesthetically it might fit in a little bit better. I just want to make sure that all those things are still, that we're all under the understanding that we are going to be dealing with those items as part of the site plan review.
Absolutely. And, we're committed to, I'd indicated, as opposed to a fence going around there, what we've done numerous times is created a wall that emulates the building wall itself. So as you're driving down the road, in this case, if you were driving from west to east on Route 6, when you looked at the area along the side of the enclosure here, it would look the exact same as the wall on this part of the building. So you really can't differentiate that there's a dumpster or a compactor in that area.
I mean, my view is that we've got some work to do around that configuration, but as long as, that's clearly something that can wait till site plan.
Okay.
Yeah, Joe, your statements are correct. And obviously we don't need to do this now, but if you remove that one dumpster and leave that big dumpster there, you basically, if you're going through that drive-through, when you make that turn to go towards Route 6, you're going to be facing a wall, okay, or a fence, or unless you pull out and go to a lane over. So you really might want to think about extending from the edge of that building, which is the point, I guess it's the right there. You may want to start something there to make it obvious that where the cars should go. Because,
or at least some kind of striping, right, Bruce?
Right, at least
Great.
at least some kind of striping would be the least of which, because you don't want somebody turning after they get their pickup and are faced into a fence.
Yeah, and and I'm sure you're going to look at this, Patrick, and I'm sure Mike will be on top of this as well. But if you have a truck on the back end of that compactor, facing, I'm not so sure somebody can get out of that drive-through, right? We've got to make sure that pinch point, that conflict doesn't exist.
But typically across the board on, I'm going to say 75% of CVS's, limitations are placed on the hours that trash can pick up the receptacles on the facilities here. And typically what we try to do is keep it an hour before or an hour after store opening and closing.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, Patrick, right? We hear that all the time. And I think the hit record is the actual track record is, I wish we were getting 75% compliance, but, so I just think it's something that we should look at and, and because it becomes very difficult to enforce once you're operating, right? I'd rather configure the site to minimize that impact if possible.
May I ask a question about the trash compactor? Can I ask a question about the trash compactor? What kind of materials are compacted in there? If there's any fluid or liquids within it, the materials, where do they go?
Hopefully I can address that fairly quickly. Compactor that's loaded from the building is cardboard.
Okay.
And that's, solely a cardboard compactor. The smaller unit that will be relocating over here, that's the multi-purpose trash dumpster. CVS has no food processing, doesn't sell fresh produce or any wares of that nature. I would suggest your concern is like at the back of supermarkets where they throw all the old produce and all that stuff, and you get a bunch of stuff leaking out of the dumpsters and smell unsightly stains. You don't have that with CVS because they have no food processing whatsoever there. No fresh foods, there's some frozen freezer food, soda, and some milk, but milk is not disposed of in dumpsters because it's actually can be considered a hazardous waste. So you don't have that issue. That I think that's the question you were kind of
going
to. Yes, so hopefully that answered it fully for you.
I'd like to make two comments, two high level. This is not the site plan meeting, right? This is preliminary, but there's two things that glare out at me that I think you should look at, and they're both from a public safety standpoint, and our public safety agencies and Somers are very much involved in our planning process. I could see that we don't have any fire lanes around the building, and I know that that's going to be something that the fire department is going to be concerned with the size and type of structure that this will be. They're going to want to be able to pull a ladder truck up as close as possible. Route 6 looks like that offset is too great for them to come from the front, and the back might be too narrow for them to park a fire truck. So something for you to look at, review our fire code in the town and make sure that your plan is going to be compliant with that, because we have had plans delayed because of it. And the second thing that I see, that I reviewed the 44-page submission, I didn't see anything in it. Maybe too early for that, but I would strongly suggest the use of safety bollards. In my public safety tenure, I've seen numerous accidents for whatever reason at pharmacies, CVS's, Rite Aids, especially with drive-throughs where cars end up inside the stores. We've had it here in Somers. I can account on ones that happen in Yorktown Heights. And then I can go on and on about that. So that's just something else that I think that our public safety agencies are going to request clarification on, or insist that they be included in the site plans. So
there's a ballard in front of each ADA spot. There's a black dot in front of each of the spots here.
And that's going to represent what about on the drive-through side?
On the drive-through side, we have ballards up against the building in this area.
Okay.
And we understand over in here, we're going to be doing something different. It'll be striping. We need to change we committed to changing the operational area back here.
Sure.
So we haven't really looked at that in any depth or detail. And over where we don't have the ballards in this area, we have curb stops for the vehicles.
Okay. And then just the fire lanes.
Yep, absolutely. And we'll meet with the fire department to flush out any issues from that perspective.
I have one other suggestion. Considering the number of handicapped folks across the street and in the community, I think you need more than 4 handicap spots. I think maybe all of those spots in the front of the building should be designated handicap. 4 is not going to be sufficient considering the number of senior citizens in the community.
We will take a look at that, sir. We're just going to have to look at that, and we'll see if we can find a similar situation with, senior housing and the like immediately adjacent to another CVS.
Is anyone aware of a town requirement? Like if you have 100 spots, 10 have to be handicapped. Do we have anything like that?
Not town, it's all ADA.
Just
Mike
ADA?
Mike will look at that, I'm
Looking
sure.
at that, just certain requirements.
We meet the code on that, but I think what the gentleman is suggesting is, aside from just meeting codes, we should be looking at the immediate environment around us and possibly adapt to the environment if necessary by providing some more ADA spaces. Should senior facilities and otherwise be in sufficient quantity for it to be required on the site. And we'll take a look at that, sir. Don't know how we'll look at it, so I can't tell you methodology right now, but we will take a look at it and see what we can find out, and we will adapt if necessary.
Consider the residents on the other side of Route 6.
And I think to Dennis's point, we have a history within the town at the Somerstown Shopping Center. And it was just after Sabrina, the former planner, left, and before Saret arrived, there was a expansion of the number of ADA compliant spots outside the Cvs Pharmacy. So Saret, it just predates you, but that is something that was sort of done as a retrofit to accommodate the need down there. So we kind of have a history of already doing that in the town. Yes. Where we had we had proximate to that, a large population, housing complex that has a lot of senior citizens living there.
Okay.
When everybody's done, I have a couple of comments. Ready?
Yes.
Okay. In my September 1st memo, I got into some details related to loading and some other parking maneuvers related to zoning. I want Patrick and Mike to look closely at my comments as you review this, because I saw some things that this plan might not meet. And when you're making any modifications, take a close look and make sure it meets. I'll point out one just in particular that related, there's a chart in the zoning that relates to different parking at different angles and what the standards are for the aisle widths. And for that 60-degree parking area behind the building, once you take into account the drive aisle, I'm not sure it meets the zoning requirement. So I want the two of you to discuss that, take a look at it, see if, Mike, you think it does meet it, and Patrick, if you think it meets it, and if it doesn't, what you're going to do about it, and if it's something that needs a variance, or Mike, if you don't think a variance is going to be a safe situation, the thing that you said you don't want to do, Patrick, which is to move the boundary of the property back a little into the woods, may be something that you have to do. And I'm sure you don't want to do that to create additional impervious surface. I can understand why, but I want you to take a careful look and make sure that zoning is being met.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Any other comments? Joe, you all done? Any other board members?
No.
I only count 60 parking spots.
And I'll point out that, again, this has to do with what I talked about as the aisle width and what the queuing is behind that. And if the queuing impedes any of those parking spaces and the ability of people to get in and out of those, whether or not that reduces some of the parking spaces and whether or not you're going to meet the requirements. And, you know, Vicky was talking about other ones that may or may not work. And you only have 2 spaces to play with in order to meet the requirements. So all of that needs to be looked at.
All right.
Understood.
All right, if there's no other comments, then thank you, Patrick, for the presentation. And I guess we'll hear back from you when you go, after you go before the zoning board.
And thank you for your recommendations. It's always helpful to get early input like this. And so it's very much appreciated both from the board.
Thank you very much.
Consultants.
Are
Okay.
we making a recommendation to the zoning board of appeals?
Yes, that's what you need to do and vote
I
on.
would suggest we do.
Yes.
Well,
I so
I'll make a
move.
motion that we make a recommendation to the ZBA for variance for the drive-through.
I second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you.
All right. Next on our agenda is application from the New York American Water Company for site plan approval for granular activated carbon treatment system. And it's the buildings at Dyker Water Treatment Facility, Crysdale Drive and US 202 and Mill Street. Excuse me. Is there a representative from the applicant here?
Hi, yes, this is Kristen Barrett. I'm
Hi.
with Hazen and Sawyer, represent New York American Water Utility. They are also on the phone, John Kilpatrick and Chris Peters. And we had submitted a package back in June. We spoke on the July 8th meeting about our site plan application, and we got some review by Woodard and Curran and had some additional comments that we discussed at the July 8th meeting. And so at this time, we have not submitted any additional material. This again is a small building to house a GAC treatment system to add additional treatment to the existing well system that is at the Dyker water system, which serves the Willows community. And so I wasn't planning to present any additional information, just give you an update that we have since done a site survey. We have done geotechnical investigations, And we have submitted an application to the ZBA for some variances that we are looking for roof height and setback and distance between the two buildings. So we are on the agenda for the meeting next week with ZBA. So our purpose here tonight is we would like to request to be on the October agenda for a public hearing for this project, assuming all goes well at the ZBA meeting next week. We will, prior to the October meeting, our plan would be to submit additional information to, with a more detailed site plan design, address the comments that we had received prior. And so that would be submitted prior to the I think it's sometime at the end of September 29th or 30th, that would be due in advance of the October public hearing.
Okay.
So our request is for the public hearing.
Joe, do you have any comments?
No, I appreciate the update. You know, that I was going to ask the question, are we going to get a new submittal before the October hearing? And it sounds like Kristen committed to doing that. And I think as long as we're on that path, I know there's a long lead time on a lot of these items. And I know that the applicant is anxious to proceed, and I would support the board placing them on the agenda for next meeting for that public hearing.
For a public hearing, okay. Saret?
No, that's the reason they're on, is to publicly identify that the board is scheduling them for a public hearing.
So I'm assuming that we can make a motion to put them on the October 14th meeting for the public hearing once they have a successful zoning board meeting.
Right.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, and then last I'm sorry, was there a comment?
Yes, I just noted that in the original submission, it didn't mention that they had to drill more wells. And I see from subsequent material that came in that they will be drilling for more water.
Well, let me clarify for that, Nancy. That's true, but we've talked about doing this in two separate applications.
Yes, I see that.
Right, one for the building, which is what we're talking about now, and the second would be for the wells. The reason why, and we said, you know, Saret and I talked about this relative to, does that create any type of segmentation issue? And you know, the determination was that we didn't think it did, because it's not more environmentally or less environmentally impactful by doing these separately. The reason why they want to decouple them, Nancy, is because, like I said, that, you know, that they're anticipating they want to have this facility up and operational by the end of, you know, by the end of the year, when that's the expectation and when the new requirements for treatment are going to be in place.
Yeah.
So and there's long lead time on some of the equipment. So they didn't want to have to wait to do the test well, get the samples, right? There's a lot of activities that have to happen around the wells. And that's the reason why we're doing this in two applications.
I understand. I just really wanted that answer.
Kristen, I didn't misstate anything, did I, Kristen?
Nope, that's correct.
Joe, is one project required? So the end game, is each project required in order to complete it, or are they two separate entities just happen to parallel one another? Like, do you need the wells to now filter it out of the new system, or is it just two separate things that we're keeping separate?
I mean, I'll let Kristen answer that.
It is two separate entities. The existing wells need to be treated for the removal, with the JC treatment for the removal of the PFOA and PFAS.
Right, and the new wells provide more capacity, right, Kristen?
And you determined you need more capacity, yeah.
And then eventually you will tie the new wells into the GAC system after that's completed.
Yeah.
But you will begin the process using the old wells and the new filtering system. And when your wells are completed, you'll deactivate the old ones and then start up the new ones, and that will be your water source. Is that?
I think it's addition. It's addition.
Oh, in addition
to. I'd rather not speak about deactivating the wells. I would like to have the next group talk about the well supply.
The plan for that. All right, but they are tied together. That's tied together, but handled separately.
Chris, my understanding is conceptually you have that correct. I understand.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to see if they're just
commenting on another application, but you know, one of the reasons some of the wells have high levels of contaminants.
PFOAs, right? Yeah. Okay. All right.
And
No,
then salt too, right? So,
Okay, so
sense.
since we're setting a public hearing, is the well drilling part of the public hearing?
No,
No,
No.
that's just, that's
Okay,
just,
second
that's just
question.
for the GAC treatment.
Second question is, will there be a public hearing for the drilling of the additional wells?
Yes,
I would hope
That's
so.
the next item
I
on
would
the
hope
agenda.
so.
that's the next item on the agenda. That's what I was just gonna get to.
All right.
It's for the Dyke Street Wetland and Watercourse Protection Permit, the same address at Crystal Drive. So is there another representative from the
well, wait a
applicant?
minute. I mean, John, I think you have a hanging chad on the,
yeah.
public hearing.
Let's close out the first thing.
I
Yeah, we have to
thought
make a.
we voted on the public hearing.
Yeah.
Yes, we already voted on that.
yes, you did.
okay.
Yes,
Appro-
we
it's
did, and it
approved.
passed.
Sorry, I got
passed.
out of my lane there. Sorry, sir.
Yep, and now I'm talking about the watercourse protection permit for the wells.
Thank you on the public hearing.
Okay, so Joe, do you want to comment on this part?
Sure. So let me just go back to where the beginning on this. Which is-
Can I interrupt for 1 second, John? You asked the question if there was a representative. I didn't hear whether anybody acknowledged that for this item.
Yes, my name is Mike Shortell. I'm with WSP. I'll be speaking on behalf of New York American regarding the water supply wells.
Thank
So-
you, Mike.
Maybe we can start with Mike giving us a summary and then.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Sure. I'll give a brief overview. What we're requesting is a wetland permit to do a few different things. Drill a new well called Well 2C, which has already been drilled and tested and was drilled under an emergency authorization. We're also looking to get authorization to do any construction activities associated with the wellhead itself, which is installing a pillar unit and extending a discharge pipe within the corridor. We're also looking to drill at potentially three locations within the New York State DEC wetland buffer. There are several permits that we need to get for this project in addition to the town of Somers wetland permit. We need to get, first and foremost, authorization from the New York State DEC to drill the three locations in the DEC buffer. We also need to get a well site approval from the Westchester County Department of Health. And at this point, the status of the Westchester County Department of Health permit is contingent on obtaining the DEC permit. And lastly, the permit we would need would be from the town of Somers for the wetland permit, which that permit would be contingent on the Westchester County Department of Health permit and the DEC permit. So there's a lot of different permits going on with this. We did receive the comment letter from Woodard and Curran, and briefly, I'll discuss briefly the comments and what our responses would be. The first comment was addressing how we would address the drilling spoils and the yield test water. First, I'll discuss what the drilling spoils are. When you drill a bedrock water supply well, there are drilling tailings that come up and out of the well. What we do is we excavate a small, we call it a tailings pit, which is located on the downslope side of the well. So as water comes out of the well, the tailings flow into the tailings pit. And on the downslope side of the tailings pit, we would then have hay bales and silt fence to catch any sediment or anything that comes out of the tailings pit. So that's how we would deal with the drilling spoils. The other aspect of the comment was how we would address, what would we do with the test water or the yield test water from any short-term testing and 72-hour yield testing. There is an on-site pond on the Willows property, and we would direct the discharge water from the yield test to that pond to prevent any erosion from the pond or the bank of the pond. We would discharge the water onto something like a sheet of plywood and allow the water to sheet flow into the pond. this is an acceptable approach from New York State DEC. So this is how they typically like us to handle that. The next comment addressed with how we would fix any disturbed areas associated with the drilling activities. We would essentially restore those areas to original condition with a native seed mix, and we can, get into further detail with Joe, as the case may be, in further conversations. The next item is concerning PFOS and PFOA. As I mentioned before, we have drilled well 2C, which is not in the DEC buffer. It's outside of the DEC jurisdiction, but within the stream corridor permit. As part of the 72-hour yield test, we collect the collect the number of water samples for a full New York State water quality analysis. And the PFOS and PFOA were essentially non-detect. We didn't really detect any concentrations above minimum laboratory detection limits. So for that well, the PFOS and PFOA are very good. The last comment was a requirement to furnish the DEC and the Westchester County Department of Health permits as part of getting the town of wetlands permit, which as soon as we get the DEC permit, which I expect in the near future, we have addressed comments from the agency. And once we get that DEC permit, I expect to get the Westchester County Department of Health permit. And then after we get the town of Somers permit, then we would be in a position to start drilling. So that sums up what our overall approach is and what we're asking for essentially.
Joe?
Yeah, and Mike, you're going to submit, I know you've submitted some written language, I guess you and I, as you mentioned, will work through the final details on all those items. I think the question that was on the table to me, what were our comments? Mike went through them all and gave you the responses. Conceptually, those are the kind of responses that we were expecting. I think we just want to review things like the location of those pits. We get, isn't one of the wells in the wetland, Mike?
Yes, and whether or not we get approval on that is to be determined.
Right, so I think those kind of details, like if we're going to be drilling in the wetland, right? Like, I don't know that we want to pit in the wetland. Like, we'll have to coordinate on that item, but I think it is the typical way that it's done. I just think we need it, detailed for us.
Sure.
This is a project that's important. We need to get water supply to our residents, and the comments the responses that I've heard, I'm comfortable with at this point.
Are you comfortable setting the public hearing for the 14th?
Yeah, and I actually think there's benefit for doing the public hearings together.
Yes.
Because I'm sure the public will be interested in both. And, again, with the commitment from Mike to work with the team between now and the next meeting to get a revised submittal in, I am supportive of that.
Board member comments?
Go for it.
No, you've cleared it all up.
Agreed.
All right, then I'll make a motion that we set a public hearing for the North American Water Company, Dyker Street wetland area, and the water course protection permit for October 14th, 2020.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ron.
Our next planning board meeting is October 14th, 2020. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
So moved.
Second it.
Thank you all.
Good
Take
night.
care.
Somers.
Night,
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Silver.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
good night.